partners in ministry. We are sorry to say that our General Minister and President, Reverend Terri Hord Owens, is unable to be with us today as she had planned, but she is with her mother in the hospital. We are grateful that she is being a daughter today, that she is helping her mother move from the hospital to rehab and hopefully to recover and gather strength. We covet your prayers with Terri. Join with us in that. And we will now move to Lori Tapia, who on today's call will bring us prayers of comfort, of hope, and of strength for the journey ahead towards permanent protections for DACA recipients. Lori, as you may know, is the pastor who is our national Hispanic pastor of Hispanic Ministries for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Following Lori's time of prayers, we will move next to spend time with Natalie Teague, our Disciples Immigration Legal Counsel. And then I, Reverend Sharon Stanley Ray with Disciples Refugee and Immigration Ministries, will share after Natalie's legal updates about ways that we can find hope by engaging, by pushing, and by working as partners for the permanent protections that are needed. Reverend Lori, we'll turn it over to you.
Dios les bendiga a cada uno de ustedes y bienvenidos a este espacio de oración, de información y de instrucción hacia adelante en cuanto a la decisión del viernes en cuanto a DACA. Welcome to each one of you. These are uncertain times, but they are not times that are without hope. We are God's people, and as long as we continue to be God's people and God continues to be God, there is always hope. And we continue to look to that hope. And I would like to read a scripture in this moment. Psalm 21 says, I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by light. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. Y lo voy a leer en español. I'm going to read this in Spanish. It says, a las montañas levanto mis ojos. ¿De dónde ha de venir mi ayuda? Mi ayuda proviene del Señor, creador del cielo y de la tierra. No permitirá que tu pie resbale. Jamás duerme el que te cuida. Jamás duerme, no, ni se adormece el que cuida de Israel. El Señor es quien te cuida. El Señor es tu sombra protectora. De día el sol no te hará daño, ni la luna de noche. El Señor te protegerá. De todo mal protegerá tu vida. El Señor te cuidará en el hogar y en el camino desde ahora y para siempre. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, God of grace, God of hope, God who knows it all, sees all, and is with us through it all. We come before you humbly, knowing that you have placed within us your people, everything that we need to make justice happen. We know, God, that we receive information, we receive news, we receive phone calls and text messages with news that deepen and sadden our hearts. But God, we always seek to you. Our eyes look up to the mountain, for that is where our help comes from. That is where our hope shines and glimmers. And God, we call on our legal counsel and we call on our advocacy ministries, because it is there, God, where we find information that is faithful and truthful and helps us to continue to push forward. When it seems like everything comes to a stop, God, you allow us to take our breath in that moment. You re-strengthen us and you renew us, for we know there is a long journey ahead. But God, you prepare our feet to continue walking. You prepare our mouths to continue proclaiming justice. You prepare our bodies to continue to deal with those things that come against us that feel like they hold us back. But Lord, you continue to call us to move forward. In this moment, God, we place every single recipient of DACA, their families, in your hands. For we trust, God, when the strength seems to dwindle, you extend your hands and say, come, rest in the palm of my hand. Here I am to hold you and to carry you in this time of uncertainty, in this time of lack of clarity. God, you see with clear eyes, you see with clarity. You examine every heart, and you know, God, you know the hurt, you know the pain, you know the frustration, you know the anger, God. May our holy anger rise to the surface so that we may be your people, the people who make justice happen, the people who walk humbly before you, God. It is in this time, God, that we place every single person who is hurting in this time. But God, we also trust, God, that there is a plan. We trust, God, that you continue to walk among us. Señor, confiamos en este tiempo de incertidumbre, en este tiempo de desconocer el futuro. Señor, tu luz y tu esperanza permanecen para siempre. Tú eres Dios fiel, tú eres nuestro refugio y nuestro amparo en tiempos de angustia. Tú eres luz en las tinieblas. Y Dios, tu palabra nos promete una y otra vez que tú nos sostienes, que tú nos fortaleces para la buena batalla. Y Señor, tú peleas la batalla por nosotros. Señor, prepara nuestros pies y danos las palabras de sabiduría y entendimiento, Señor, para seguir proclamando justicia. No solamente proclamándola, Señor, sino yendo hacia esa justicia, siendo instrumentos de justicia. Señor, declaramos que tu voluntad es soberana, declaramos que tú eres Dios todopoderoso y declaramos, Señor, que tú puedes todo. Nosotros, Señor, nos comprometemos a hacer lo posible, reconociendo que tú puedes hacer todo lo imposible. God, we commit to continue to doing the possible because we trust that you will do the impossible. We continue to commit to showing up, God. We continue to proclaiming your justice, God, to continue calling out that which comes against your word. Let us be your people, God. Let us be your church. Let us imagine all the things that can happen when we trust in you, God. Lord, it is in this time where we know that those who cause harm, those who deceit, Lord, those who come against the most vulnerable rise up. And in this moment, we declare that you are a God who protects. And we are here to bring legal advice, and we are here to call out moves of advocacy. Lord, may you continue to be with us in every space, in every place. And we will give you all the honor and all the glory. Te daremos toda la honra y toda la gloria, porque tú eres Dios soberano y bueno, Dios fiel, digno de suprema alabanza. We love you, God. And Jesus, it is because we love you that we are called to move. May you receive the honor and glory, and may your name be glorified as we continue to seek your perfect will, which is that the vulnerable are no longer vulnerable, that the oppressed are no longer oppressed, but rather are set free. That those who are told that they have no rights have rights, that those who hunger have enough. We are a people, Lord, who are hungry for justice and righteousness. Let us use that to continue moving forward. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Dios les bendiga a cada uno de ustedes y que el Señor continúe llevando esperanza a tu corazón, esperanza a tu situación, esperanza a tu hogar. Y continuamos con el programa. Let us continue with the program.
Thank you, Lori. Mil gracias, Lori. Thank you all for being here. Thank you so much for taking the time to learn about what's happening with DACA and to stand up and be in support with DACA recipients. Mil gracias por estar aquí, por aprender lo que está pasando con DACA, por estar de apoyo a todos los recipientes de DACA y sus familiares. My name is Natalie Teague, and I am your Disciples Immigration Legal Counsel. Me llamo Natalia Teague, y yo soy la abogada de inmigración de la Iglesia Cristiana de Discípulos de Cristo. Today, I'm going to be sharing kind of a synopsis of what happened with this legal decision. I do have slides and will be presenting in English today. There will be a larger, more in-depth legal presentation in English tomorrow, same time, 1 p.m. Wednesday, July 21st, and then Thursday at 1 p.m. July 22nd, there will be a larger, more in-depth presentation with all slides and all presentation in Spanish that I will do as well. I'm hoping that one of our wonderful helpers will be able to put the links in the chat so that you can look at registering for those. We'll also be recording and posting them after as well. And entonces, hoy toda la presentación va a estar en inglés, las pantallas todo en inglés. Sin embargo, hay presentaciones legales de mucha más información, más amplia, el mañana en inglés a la 1 de la tarde de la zona este y el jueves a la 1 de la tarde zona este, todo en español. O sea, jueves todo en español. Y luego el viernes voy a estar con Pastoral Lori otra vez en su programa Contigo a la 1 de la tarde, zona este. Entonces, esa es la semana en que yo estoy con ustedes durante mi almuerzo, 1 de la tarde cada día, empezando hoy hasta viernes. Y toda la información aparece en mi página de Facebook y Twitter y vamos a enviar toda la información. So we're going to dive in now with what happened. But before we can do that, I need to back up just a little bit, and we're going to talk about what is DACA. And probably everybody here on the call knows, but just to back up, June 2012, then President Obama used executive action to create a program to defer deportation of immigrants who arrived here as children. He did that because Congress had failed to act for 11 years at the time. Because Congress had not passed the DREAM Act or any version of it. It has now been 20 years that we've been waiting for some version of the DREAM Act for Dreamers, for DACA recipients. To qualify for DACA, applicants had to meet criteria, pay fees, and submit to a background check. If they were approved, they did not accrue unlawful presence. They would receive a work permit in 2-year intervals, which enabled them to apply for a social security number, and in many states, therefore, be able to get driver's licenses. They also, in certain cases, could go on and apply for advanced parole, which is kind of like a travel permit, but it's really so that you can leave the United States and re-enter lawfully. The most important thing to keep in mind right now is that DACA did and does not lead to green card status or citizenship. So again, it is not a permanent pathway. It does not lead to any long-term status. It is literally deferred action in periods of 2 years that has to be renewed every 2 years. So where have we been? You're probably looking at this slide and chest tightening, completely overwhelmed, right? Because this is there's a lot of information here. And when I put all this together, I had this moment of this is a red hot mess and probably way too much for us to look at. But then I stepped back and I thought, no, this is what DACA recipients have gone through for 9 years. It has been this complete roller coaster, this complete tornado of legal confusion, multiple federal lawsuits in multiple different jurisdictions, and things going in all kinds of different ways. So we're going to talk about it. So remember, like I just mentioned, in June 2012, Obama created the DACA program through executive action. Very popular, about 750,000 folks have benefited from that. Enormous economic, social, all kinds of contributions. And it was such a popular and such a helpful program that in November 2014, after the midterm elections, Obama announced an expansion of DACA along with DAPA, which was deferred action for parental accountability that was supposed to be for parents of US citizens and permanent residents. Shortly thereafter, that February, Texas and 22 states sued in the Southern District of Texas. That case was before Judge Hainan, the exact same judge that we're talking about today for the case that just came down on Friday. Hainan issued a nationwide injunction against DAPA and expanded DACA. So they were not able to go into place. The litigation continued. In November of 2015, the Fifth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals affirmed Judge Hainan's injunction here. So DAPA and DACA still did not go into place. And then in 2016, the Obama administration sought review by the Supreme Court in January. It was granted. However, in February, Justice Scalia passed away. That meant that there were only 8 justices left on the Supreme Court when oral arguments were held in April, and then when the decision came down in June of 2016. The decision was a 4-4 split, which, because again, there was not a 9th justice because President Obama was not able to get a nominee through the Supreme Court before the end of his term. So what that meant is that legally the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal opinion controlled. So the injunction against DAPA and expanded DACA stayed in place, and there was nothing more to do with that. End of 2016, Trump comes into office. In September of 2017, Trump attempted to end DACA through 2 different memos. Several lawsuits were filed, including the Regents case, which is the case that went to the Supreme Court last summer. An injunction was entered against that. May of 2018, because DACA was still in force, the original DACA was for renewals was still in force at that point, Texas and the states filed a new lawsuit challenging whether DACA was legal. And that is the lawsuit that had a conclusion this past Friday. Continuing on, just so that we're riding the whole roller coaster that DACA recipients have been through, the lawsuit against Trump's DACA rescission went on to the Supreme Court last June, you may recall. And the ruling 5-4 was that the manner in which the administration rescinded DACA was arbitrary and capricious. In July, essentially that came down, but part of the decision also kind of laid out a roadmap for how it should have been rescinded. So in July, that's exactly what happened. A year ago, Acting Secretary Wolf filed a new rescission of DACA, throwing things back into play again. More lawsuits filed, all the lawsuits in all these different jurisdictions are going on. But in the December, late last year, in the Eastern District of New York, Judge Karafis ruled to vacate the Wolf memo because Wolf was not lawfully appointed, as was determined by GSA. And so the legal effect was that DACA was restored after all of this time to its original 2012 iteration. And so as of right before Christmas last year, the good piece of that was that new applications could be filed as well as the renewals. So the renewals had been continuing all of this time, but new applications could be filed and initial applications could be filed for the first time in several years. Meanwhile, also in late December before Christmas, this case, the Texas lawsuit where the order was just issued last Friday, this one where we are right now, the actual last hearing was right before Christmas at the end of last year. Essentially, we've been waiting all this time. We knew we were going to get a decision at some point, just didn't know when, and here we are. So since the last time we had a legal session, December 7th to July 16th, DHS was accepting all DACA applications as originally envisioned. So that meant initial first-time applications, renewal requests. Renewals were issued for 1 year that under the Trump administration were to be extended for 2 years validity, which would have meant that, or which means that filing fees of about $500 could be filed every other year instead of every year, which is helpful. Current DACA recipients were able to apply for advanced parole. But again, all of that was changed again, was shifted again this past Friday. So as of last Friday, July 16th, DACA has been ruled to be unlawful by one federal district court judge. Nationwide injunction. And And what it means is that in a nutshell, is that no new initial applications can be adjudicated until further notice. But however, and I can't stress this enough, current DACA recipients are okay, are safe, and for the time being. But I say for the time being until further notice, because this is not something that at some point that will shift again and the roller coaster may start all over again. So that was a lot. I'd just like us all to take just a moment to breathe, right? For all the DACA recipients that might be on this call or might be listening to this later, I want you to know that you are not and you have never been alone. And I want us all to be purposeful about reaffirming right now, right here, before I go any further, that DACA recipients and their families are welcome here and that they are here to stay. And so again, just taking a moment to breathe that in. So I'm going to talk about the decision now, and I'm going to start from the really good parts to the really bad parts. There was immediate follow-up on all of this from the administration. This was the statement issued on Saturday by President Biden. All of this will be posted and available later. What I want you to see now is that in his statement, he mentioned that DHS is currently in the process of proposing a new rule that would help to solidify, bolster, and essentially fix some of the issues with DACA that have just been at the heart of all of these legal challenges. Let's also say that on Saturday, DHS Secretary Mayorkas also released a statement, confirmed that the Department of Justice does intend to appeal the order. DHS USCIS will continue processing DACA renewal requests consistent with the ruling, but again, he also points out that we need legislation so that there is full and permanent legal protection for these kids. So, the good. Current DACA recipients are not currently affected until further notice. And the decision mentions it could come from any three of these courts. Renewals will continue to be accepted in 2-year validity periods. That's how it should be coming down. If you take nothing else from this, if you are a DACA recipient or you know a DACA recipient, if someone's DACA is close to expiring, meaning within the next 150 days, they should apply as soon as possible to go ahead and have an application in the pipeline of processing. If your DACA has expired, you should speak with an attorney. You may be able to renew if it's within 1 year of expiration. If not, again, you want to get qualified legal counsel to speak about that. Again, the good news is that arguably all of this may be able to be fixed when DHS engages in regulatory rulemaking. A silver lining to that may be that the criteria may shift some and there may be potential changes in eligibility as well. So this may be a good thing. Again, that was confirmed by the White House statement. But you're going to hear this over and over throughout this webinar, is that Congress could fix all of this. Congress could fix all of this through legislation. So some more good news to kind of quell some fears about this is that the court in its decision did not direct or order any enforcement measures against any current DACA recipient. In fact, this is the exact language. To be clear, this order does not require DHS or DOJ to take any immigration, deportation, or criminal action against any DACA recipient, applicant, or other individual that it would not otherwise take. And that nothing in this injunction should be read as ordering DHS or any other governmental entity to cancel or otherwise terminate DACA status for any individual who currently is, as of this date, a DACA recipient in good standing. So again, if someone currently has DACA, they're in good standing, they are safe for now. So here's the bad news. The new and initial DACA applications that just opened for the first time in several years at the beginning of December 2020, very few of those have been approved to date. All of those applications that are sitting there will not be adjudicated until further notice. Because again, DACA was ruled to be unlawful for not having gone through the federal regulatory rulemaking process under the Administrative Procedures Act, which is deemed to have applied under the Regent's decision that was handed down from the Supreme Court last summer. So again, the court granted a permanent injunction with nationwide effect that the DACA memo and program are hereby vacated. However, that it's called a vacatur. What happened, the vacatur is stayed, meaning that it is not applied to current DACA recipients. However, it is specifically effective for new applicants, for folks who are applying for initial DACA. More bad news. So essentially, the decision binds the US government, all its departments and agencies for administering DACA and from re-implementing DACA without compliance with the APA. So in other words, the Biden administration has no choice but to undergo the formal regulatory rulemaking process at this point. New initial applications will continue to be accepted, but they cannot be adjudicated. I've already heard from numerous colleagues that biometrics appointments, which is the first step in the background check process for DACA applicants, biometric appointments for initial applicants, not renewals, initial applicants, those have been canceled. And so if someone had filed an initial application and had a biometrics appointment scheduled and coming up, that is or will be canceled. You will be receiving a notice of that. DHS is, again, currently enjoined from taking any action on pending initial applications. And then regarding advanced parole, which is that travel permit, it's a little more complicated that, but for purposes of this presentation, the advanced parole part of it, the decision does not speak to it at all. It is unclear. There are arguments that I've heard both ways about whether they may be filed, whether they do or don't apply. The upshot for today is do not apply and absolutely do not leave the United States on with advanced parole without speaking with a qualified immigration attorney. So got a little bit of a mess here. This is that slide we saw a little while ago. What's left? So again, the initial first-time applications, those are gone. The renewal requests may be filed, but unclear how long that might take. Should be issued for 2 years. Not entirely sure. We hope so. And in terms of advanced parole, it's questionable whether it's still there or not. I've crossed it out because it's something that you want to be really careful with without getting counsel first. So now I want to talk about the ugly part of it, because the court went above and beyond to adjudicate all kinds of issues and arguably to set up essentially what will inevitably happen on appeal with it. Because there will be appeals. The Department of Justice has already said that it plans to appeal. It will likely take years for all of that to make its way up. The key issue for all of this, and the key issue at the hearing and the decision, was whether or not Texas and the 8 states that remained as the plaintiffs, whether they had standing to bring the lawsuit. And standing is not standing up like a person. Standing is actually a legal term of art that means that you've been aggrieved and you were a party that can come into court and bring your complaint before the court because you've been personally affected. Obviously, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but for today's purposes, just know that it could have been that the judge had ruled that these states did not have standing to bring this lawsuit before the court, and this all would have gone very, very differently. Other ugly, bad, not great news is that the Department of Homeland Security still does not have an active and confirmed secretary. So the Biden nominee, Adu, is still waiting for her confirmation hearing. It's going to be really hard for DHS to finalize its policy and move forward with all of this without an actual secretary in a leadership role. So another opportunity for action would be to call on representatives to confirm the DHS secretary as soon as possible so that we can get things moving along. And I apologize, this should actually not be DHS, this should be USCIS, which is the agency responsible for immigration services. So then the other ugly part of this is that the Biden administration, when it pursues the regulatory rulemaking process, it's generally it'll easily take probably a year. So 6 to 12 months, because they have to actually publish a notice. There has to be a comment period where the public can comment. All of those have to be reviewed and taken into account. And then the final rule has to be promulgated. So this is not something that's going to, even though the administration is working to fix DACA, this is not going to be something that can happen quickly. So now I want to talk about the really ugly part. And the really ugly part is the language that, some of the language in the decision that doesn't have to do with kind of the black and white of can you apply or not, but some of the reasoning and rationale, and that really starts to show the kind of the political bend to some of this. And so let's dive into that. So again, the vacatur is justified on Texas and the 8 states having standing, meaning that they were aggrieved and could come to the court to bring their complaints. And they did this by citing social services, education, and healthcare costs incurred for and by DACA recipients. So in other words, making an argument that DACA recipients were, costly to these states, and that the states were having to be responsible for these folks. They also had a lengthy discussion about how DACA recipients cause labor market distortions by the volume of unlawfully present DACA recipients against whom employers are prohibited from discriminating. So in other words, employers can't, if they don't like the fact that a DACA recipient is, quote, unlawfully present, they can't discriminate against them because they do have work authorization. So it sounds like a catch-22. It's not necessarily a catch-22, but this was a huge part of the discussion. The court also found that DACA recipients are, quote, less costly to employ because they are exempt from the Affordable Care Act employer mandate. And so thus they were creating unfair competition against lawful residents of Texas. And so there was this extreme delineation between DACA recipients are here unlawfully, and here are residents who are here lawfully, and that the court seemed to essentially justify that there should be some kind of different treatment of the two groups. To do that, they had heavy reliance on Texas 1. I call Texas 1 because that was the first case that Texas and the 26 states brought back in 2015. Remember, that was affirmed by the Fifth Circuit, and so Judge Hainan basically referred back to that decision and cited it over and over again as if it was good controlling law. But it's important to remember that it wasn't really good in controlling law. It was just the default law. It was the law that went into place because when the case went to the Supreme Court, there was no ninth justice. There was a 4-4 split. And so even though it was 4-4 and there were arguments on both sides, there was no vote to break that tie, and so the Fifth Circuit case stood. So this is where we start to really see kind of how the politics, and not just in all branches of government, have completely tossed and battered this DACA program and the lives of DACA recipients here and there over years. I also want to talk about language because, again, for those of us who hold DACA recipients near and dear to our heart, there was this lengthy footnote where Judge Hainan went on and on about a justification of why illegal alien was an okay term of art to use in the decision. You can certainly pull it up and read about it if you'd like, but obviously, there's several people who believe otherwise. I believe otherwise because in immigration law, illegal alien is not found in the Immigration and Nationality Act. Someone can't be here illegally. The act of crossing the border is a crime, but being here without documentation is a civil administrative violation. Just a footnote there of my own. But other language too is that throughout the decision, Judge Hainan relied heavily on the concept that DACA conveys lawful presence, which is completely legally incorrect. So again, under the INA, the Immigration and Nationality Act, the body of law around immigration, there is no such thing as lawful presence. There's lawful status, which is not the same as lawful presence. And then there's also unlawful presence, which is when someone is not here lawfully, but it does not have a converse counteracting lawful presence equivalent under the statute. Be that as it may, that was a huge part of Hainan's justification. Another issue of language to be aware of is that there was a sizable section where the judge discussed how Congress had already declined to give DACA recipients legal status multiple times before, and quote, "This consistent rejection shows Congress's clear intent not to take this action." I think we all know, right, if we look back over history, just because it took a while for the law to change, that does not necessarily mean that the law didn't ultimately change, right? Like looking back to civil rights laws and voting rights laws and things like, and environmental laws and things like that. So it seems to be a kind of a dangerous place to hold the decision. Finally, one of the parts that really pained me is that the decision did not see DACA recipients. There was no meaningful discussion. There was really literally just one sentence, but no discussion of DACA recipients' reliance interests. In reliance interests, I mean the fact that folks have been here, they have bought houses, they have jobs, they went to school, they've contributed to their communities, they're ingrained in our communities. There's no discussion or recognition of that. And I will say that I think that is something where Hanan will come up against Supreme Court precedent from last summer, because the Supreme Court decision in 2020 talked extensively about the reliance interests of DACA recipients. Another really hard part of the decision was that there was a lengthy discussion about some demographic statistics of how some demographer just had a study that 22% of DACA recipients would leave the United States, which would decrease the economic injury to Texas. And then finally, and this is a direct quote from the case, while there are compelling policy rationales for DACA, they can have no effect on this court's legal conclusion. So there's some really ugly pieces of this. So I'm going to close my portion with this quote, that the law's function, and this is from the decision, this is not my quote, this is from Judge Hanan. The law's function is understood to be to neutralize the emotionality that legal disputes arouse in the parties and lay observers. As much as this court might agree with these sentiments, and as popular as this program might be, the proper origination point for the DACA program was and is Congress. So again, DACA recipients have waited 20 years. Let's not make them wait another 20 years, please. Again, all of this will be posted. This is my information. Again, if you are a Disciples member, I am your immigration legal counsel. You can connect with me in any of these ways. The slide and other information will be posted at the website here. There are the legal sessions that I mentioned tomorrow in English, Thursday in Spanish at 1 p.m. Eastern time. There are registration links available both at Facebook and Twitter. And with that, I want to pass over to my dear colleague, Reverend Dr. Sharon Stanley Ray, who's going to tell you all about how you can get involved and how you can start to make a difference for DACA recipients and their families.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for that incredibly helpful information. And thank you for words that leave us sad and yet charged and ready to move forward. Again, I'm Sharon Stanley Ray, and I work as your Disciples Director for Refugee and Immigration Ministries. Our office is located in Washington, D.C., where we have had the pleasure, the constant pleasure and inspiration of working with DACA recipients year after year after year, who are not just DACA recipients, who are leaders, who are shaping the messaging, shaping the possibilities, and asking through their voices for each of us as disciples of Christ to join together in making what has felt difficult really come to be. I'm going to turn now to a PowerPoint slide to share with you that helps to invite you into multiple ways of beginning and participating in making this difference. And I want to say, as we get started, that this is a moment where we should feel, though we are grieving, as the psalmist constantly find hope in the very midst of lament, we too can feel hope. Part of why we feel hope, as this initial slide reminds us, is that our work is not a partisan plea. It is not primarily about politics. It's following the moral call and scriptural call. And really, there should be an S on this because it is our moral calls through multiple values. The call of scripture that started in the Old Testament, reminding us dozens of times that we must welcome those who are most discriminated against, who are often left out, who are often placed on the margins of society. And in the New Testament, the Gospels take us much further as we hear the call from Jesus himself to get into the boat, to go to the other side, to build relationships that go beyond often our comfort zone, because it is then and it is only then that the fullness of the gospel can be experienced. And so, as we know that this is not a partisan plea, I also want to lift up one of our great heroes as disciples of Christ. And you'll hear throughout this presentation that we are not just asking for Democrats to be involved, for Republicans to be involved, but for us to all come with our full hearts of faith. One of our heroes as disciples has been Governor Ray in Iowa, who served for 5 terms, who was a Republican leader, who not just led in his state, but also was the one who for many years was the head of all other Republican governors from across the country. His name, Governor Ray, and his mission was to work through the centuries to inspire those in his state of Iowa to engage with communities who at that time were coming in as refugees, who were not welcomed, even as we have heard so much anti-immigrant sentiment in our era as well. And yet, he didn't just inspire those with whom he worked politically, he sought to inspire us all as disciples, as when he went to the 1979 Disciples General Assembly that was held in Missouri and said, I know I'm in the show me state, so don't just tell me you are committed to change. Show me how you are ready to welcome refugees. We have engaged, as Natalie said, because the DREAM Act was first introduced in 2001, 2 decades ago. We have been engaged in years of efforts inspired by DACA leaders in our towns and in our own congregations. We've been involved in marches, in prayers, and policy work. And we have been in many ways freshly inspired again during these last months of the pandemic, where we have in a new way recognized that across the country, there have been more than 200,000 DACA recipients who have been working on the front lines to protect the health and the safety of Americans. They've been in farms, they've been in grocery stores, they've worked in restaurants, they've served and fed us. They've been on the front lines in education, where almost 15,000 DACA recipients are among those who have been teachers and have helped our children throughout the time of the pandemic. We've been led in recent months. The issues of citizenship are not just coming up because Judge Hainan issued the grievous decision last Friday night. We've been engaged, being led by immigrants who are working harder than ever across the board, across multiple ethnic backgrounds, as Hispanic, Latino workers, as Asian American Pacific Islanders, as Black migrants with DACA. They have led us more than ever to call for citizenship to be offered. The ways, the strategies used, the efforts that have been put forward have also happened on multiple fronts. There's been an incredible concerted effort to try again, because we remember Natalie's long timeline of what has been tried, what has transpired through the courts, and we think of what has gone on in Congress through the years to try to get legislation passed. DACA recipients and leaders and others as immigrant rights advocates, including many of you as community members of faith, were a part of celebrating when in late mid-March, on March the 18th, the House of Representatives in DC passed an immigration bill to help dreamers, the American Dream and Promise Act. It was passed in a bipartisan way. It was passed with 9 Republicans as well as hundreds of Democrats who voted in support of it. As soon as it was passed, it was sent to the Senate. As it was sent, it stopped there. It stopped. And then this summer, on the 15th of June, DACA's 9th anniversary of its life became a time when, again, individual leaders lifted up the need for the Senate to take up the bill. At this point, as of the time of our speaking, the Judiciary Committee has not yet passed it forward from committee. The Senate is not willing at this point, through its leadership, to put it on the floor for a vote. But this effort continues for the hope to protect both dreamers and temporary protected status individuals who would all be supported if those bills were to pass. Also, as the DACA bill was passed and to help TPS recipients on the House, there has been passage of the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, which likewise would provide paths of citizenship that are permanent pathways to farm workers. For farm workers, it would be a multi-year process, but it would affirm again those kind of contributions that we have seen, especially strikingly. We know they've happened every day, but we've seen them particularly powerfully during the pandemic. At the same time as DACA recipients have supported pathways to citizenship, they've certainly not been alone. We know that the public on the Democratic side and on the Republican side in multiple bipartisan polls continue to show strong public support for DACA, as well as for pathways to citizenship for TPS recipients, farm workers, and for essential workers. There have begun through multiple immigrant rights organizations that you see represented here on this slide. There has been a compilation of multiple resources gathered together on a new website called readytostay.org that are at this point prepared to help immigrant communities do what is necessary if citizenship becomes a true opportunity. And yet, despite each of those efforts, we know, and again, to underline what Natalie said earlier, only we can encourage Congress to act now, and only Congress can make the kinds of decisions that are needed to become permanent. I want to invite you as one easy action that we all can take to consider sharing this very short 30-second video that just came out this morning. Share it with your friends. It helps demonstrate why this is a moment when we can now lean in to request that Congress do what only it can do to provide pathways that are permanent for citizenship. But how else do we do that? If we don't have a chance, if the Senate's not going to take up the bills that have been there for months waiting and asking for them to consider, how do we get passage? If we don't pass the bills through regular order, we can pass them through a process, a budgeting process known as reconciliation. To do that, this will require permission from the Senate, but it also, and it's parliamentarian, but it also, if it is passed, would mean that only 50 votes are required. So we're going to stay here for a moment. We're going to celebrate that all of the meanings and the fullness that we in faith communities hold for reconciliation, that in a different way with some different meanings, but also filled with fullness, reconciliation is what offers a potential pathway that we see could come into reality just in the months ahead. The scheduling for it is really pretty imminent. We are in the time frame of moving forward in this pathway now. We have heard just last week from the Senate Budget Committee and its chairperson, Bernie Sanders, that the Senate budget team is open to reconciliation. Other senators have affirmed that, and they'll be moving to a vote likely over the next couple of weeks in order to express their support further for reconciliation. There are links that we'll be sharing to explain what reconciliation is and how it works more in detail. And we'll also continue to invite you to other opportunities to learn about that. But for now, we also want to point you to places like this. We invite you to go to the UnitedWeDream.org site, access top 5 things you need to know about the Texas case on DACA. It's not nearly as detailed as what Natalie shared, which is filled with information, and we hope you'll continue to listen and re-listen to what she all just taught us. But if you are looking for brief summary pieces, this is one good place to go. The resources are also available in Spanish language, and we invite you to continue to go to the DACA page on the Disciples, Refugee, and Immigration Ministries, or RIM website, where you can find many different education documents, stories of DACA recipients, and ways that you can engage. And these resources are going to continue to be updated regularly. One of the very simple but important ways that you can take action right now is to sign this petition that's on the UnitedWeDream.org website that will go immediately to Congress, that will say to them that you, as an ally with Dreamers, as a Dreamer perhaps yourself, as a pastor of Dreamers or with Dreamers, that we are standing together to urge for permanent solutions and citizenship to be offered. We ask that you would lift up some of the kinds of quotes that Natalie referred to earlier, and these are ones from President Biden, Vice President Harris, and from our DHS Secretary Mayorkas, who all of them over the weekend indicated their support for DACA recipients and for permanent pathways. We also will be sharing multiple quotes that are helpful to repeat and to multiply and replicate on your Twitter accounts, on your Facebook accounts, or on every other Instagram or TikTok platform that you may be on, so that Congress can hear consistently from you. And we'll be sharing information about how you find your legislators, how you make sure you're pointing your messages towards them to repeat and to say what you feel, as well as to share broadly the support from legislators who have already spoken out. I invite you too to share what you're hearing from those who are taking bold stands as educators and as business leaders. Many CEOs of top businesses, many of our top universities across the country are already speaking out, have convened a letter that was signed by over 400 leaders just over last weekend that's already been sent to the administration. There also will be a webinar happening tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time, which you can register for under a bit.ly link at DACAcourt.org. decision. And this will help you know if you are a DACA recipient, especially who is a dreamer, if you are a parent of a DACA recipient who may be either at or coming to college age time, if you are a chaplain or an administrator in one of our higher education and leadership ministries within the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, we especially hope that you will plug in also to this additional resource and webinar tomorrow. You may know, and if you haven't heard, we want to reiterate that over the last several weeks, literally for over 3 weeks straight, leaders, more than 65 DACA recipients and pastors have been gathering here in Washington, D.C. to take action in what has been called the Fast for Freedom. It's been exciting as disciples congregations to plug in, to help lead prayers, to engage together in fasting and support and organizing assistance and actions with all who have come to participate. And you can go to the Faith in Action website and continue to follow the hashtag #WeAreEssential, because next week we're starting again another strong week of action here in DC with multiplication around the country. When the fasters were in town just for the last month, there have been more than 65 legislators who came to meet in person, often themselves as members, sometimes with their staff. And this has been an important way that we as faith partners have helped to ramp up the noise to undergird our support for citizenship for all. And I want to invite you to sign up now for a webinar that will be happening next Tuesday, led by us as Disciples of Christ, together with our partners in the Interfaith Immigration Coalition. This webinar will focus on all of the ways that, in particular, during August recess, you can engage with your leaders to help support citizenship, to help your legislators know how strongly in support you are that farm workers, essential workers, TPS recipients, and dreamers should be included in the next recovery package, and if necessary, that the vehicle of reconciliation should be used. One of the things you'll learn about also on the webinar is how every Monday during August recess, beginning on August the 9th, we'll be gathering from 12 to 12:30 noon Eastern time. So it's a short time each Monday, first to engage in prayer, secondly, to hear a testimony from a dreamer, DACA recipient, a TPS, farm worker, or essential worker, and then to find out actions you can take in that week to join with faith partners all around the country from multiple backgrounds to make sure we're lifting up our voice, to be certain that the Senate and the House will both pass through reconciliation pathways to citizenship. We want to invite you also, if you have time, to access these resources. And I want to say that as this news piece mentioned, from Arizona to West Virginia, people of faith are demanding pathways to citizenship. We have created 17 different press releases from Arizona, Colorado, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, Montana, Nevada, let's see where else, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, and other states are all gathered voices of faith leaders. And we ask that you would share those if you're from any of those 17 states. If you're not from those 17 states, contact me. Let me know that you're ready to make a statement in support of citizenship for DACA recipients and others. And we'd like to make sure that your voice is getting out and being heard. And some of you engaged with us throughout recent months with some of our favorite partners who are at NACASEC, a Korean American-led immigrant rights organization, who led every single week what they call phone dogging. And we joined them back in the spring once a week for what we said was faith on the phones. Phone dogging is starting again. Again, the messaging is going to point towards citizenship. It's going to be happening every Wednesday from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. And you can see here the link where you can go to join that. Last Saturday, as DACA leaders gathered outside the United Methodist Building, which is right across in DC from the Supreme Court, national leaders led at the end. They had shared tears, they shared stories of support, they shared their commitments that nothing would happen about DACA without their presence, and they shared their deep commitment that they were not only interested in DACA recipients getting pathways to citizenship, they wanted to ensure that their mothers, their grandmothers were not left behind. And so they said, they spoke strongly and repeatedly of the investment to also support TPS recipients, farm workers, and other essential workers. And then, even though they had shared tears, had been disappointed because of some good news, but also the bad news, and as Natalie said, the ugly news that came out in the decision from Friday, they nonetheless gathered together also and shared in a chant that restored them on that day and restores all of us and calls us all into the fight, where they said, I believe that, I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. And as they chanted that with tears in their eyes, it can become to a chant that we, as faith partners, can say because of our surety of the strength of God calling us to speak against all efforts to stop the inhumanity, to stop evil approaches against any effort that tries to exclude any human being created by God. Because we can know we can win through the power of God, through the depth of love, through the hope of our scriptures that is affirmed constantly throughout them, and that is made possible as each of you join together your voices of faith this summer and into the early fall as we approach these critical votes and use of reconciliation to bring forward real, permanent, final, and finally pathways to citizenship. Please contact us at RIM on our Facebook site, through the phone, through email. Follow us on our website and sign up to receive what we call RIM Wrap, regular messaging and newsletters that will be delivered electronically to continue to let you know how to be involved. On behalf of myself, Disciples, Refugee, and Immigration Ministries, of Lori Tapia as our National Hispanic Ministries pastor, on behalf of Natalie Teague, our Disciples Legal Immigration Counsel, and also holding Reverend Terri Hord Owens in our hearts, who sends her love for this video, even as she is continuing today to be a daughter with her mother in the hospital. We pray for you, Terri, and we pray and we act together with all seeking justice. Thank you again, and thank you to Brenda, Rossi, and Kara Gilger, who have helped us with our tech today. Bye-bye.